Hi, Social Studies for the Child class. This is your lecture over what is history. Things that you'll need is your interactive notebook. Turn to page 32 and of course some pencils, colored pencils, markers, all that type of stuff. So when we're talking about what is history, we are just going into the future and thinking into the future. We are going to cover what is history, what is geography, what is economics, what is government, because again, those are the things that that the standards are broken down into, and those are kind of the main parts of social studies that we teach in the classroom. So specifically, what is history? I think this is the one that most of us are most comfortable on, and I wouldn't say that it is. The comfort is not healthy, because in your past, history has most likely been taught to you not in an appropriate way. Historical studies should not dominate the classroom, but the social studies classroom, but we can find that often this history part of social studies is the integral part of social studies, and it is taught a lot more than any of the other parts of social studies. It does seem to be taught more often because elementary school teachers will quickly involve biographical studies and textbooks. They throw in holidays in there. Teachers typically tend to feel more comfortable with the content because they pepper it with children's literature, which is fine and it is good, but please make sure that just because a book has been written about someone and it has been published, that we do not take that book as historically accurate. And also to think about what history are we presenting? If you look from the beginning to the end of the year, look at the history books that you have in your classroom. Does it have one theme or one color, one culture? I want you to be very critical of this in your classroom. So let's get started. On page 32 of your interactive notebook, you can see how we've broken this up, and it's broken up a lot. So I'm going to walk you through that. At the top, I've written what is history graphic organizer, and then I've kind of broken down my page into almost thirds. The bottom is a good deal bigger, but the very top is big ideas, and I have labeled those boxes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I even wrote big ideas in yellow so you can see the difference between those. And then in the middle section, it is in the classroom top 3. And then I've labeled 1, 2, 3. And then the bottom section is what to teach, and why is in the first box. And then you have boxes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Go ahead and label this now. Get everything good, and then we can move on. So pause me and then turn it back on when you're ready to roll. So again, history is the story of the past, but the question is what is our past? Whose past will we teach? It's often difficult to look at history curriculum and decide what is to be taught. Often because textbooks only cite one version of history. Children's literature a lot of times will cite one version of literature, or one version of history, although it is increasingly becoming better. But you just need to make sure, again, like I had said, whose history are you teaching? And I really want you to ponder that question, because if you're saying, well, I am teaching the history of America, I want you to look back and think about the Civil War and what you learned about the Civil War. Who primarily did you learn about? Female, male, Caucasian, African American, Asian. Think about that. When you are looking back over the course of your K-12 education, who did you primarily learn about? And I would challenge you to kind of come to the recollection that it was mostly white males that we have jumped through history on their shoulders, learning about their past. But if you really look at our country's history, there's a lot more than just white men that have lived and have done great things and powerful things and caused events in our country. So again, it's that question, whose history do we teach? Educators need to determine whose story should be included. Now, sometimes that means that you are going to go outside of the curriculum that's been given to you to purposefully integrate other people's stories. The storyline of history has not changed, but the story has been expanded to include more characters over time. And that has often happened with, again, children's literature or textbook companies being called out that, hey, this is one small fraction of American history, but this is not America's history. Historical interpretations often conflict, if not on issues of what happened, but more than on the cause and effect of those things. Why did we go to war in the Civil War? Why did people come to the United States initially? And so a lot of times we are still to this day fighting on historical issues, and then we present them to our children as clean, cold facts. And this can often be confusing. I know that a lot of times when kids get to high school, they say, well, that doesn't make sense. We weren't taught that way. Or when they get to college, a lot of times people will feel that they were just completely lied to. And I understand that because there are oftentimes in elementary schools that the history that we are teaching is just an out-and-out lie. This is just a discussion. It doesn't have anything in your interactive notebook. The next page does. So these are your big ideas. And as I go through these, I want you to choose, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 there. And I want you to illustrate the 6 of them. Okay, so let's go through here, and that's that top block on your interactive notebook. So big ideas in social studies. There's been disagreements about how much history should be taught in elementary schools. And if you think about, you guys have even asked me in class, how do you teach about bloody, horrible things that's happened in history to younger children? Well, of course, it depends on the society that they're living in. It depends on their age. It depends on their emotional maturity. But often, it can be agreed upon that students should understand just the following big ideas. And then we can then build our history and social studies classrooms on these big ideas. So the first idea is change is universal and inevitable. Change happens to everyone all the time. And that is something that we see in history books, and we need for them to understand. Just because a group of people thinks this way at this time, they are not always going to think that way. And we can offer many examples to that. The second one, the rate of change within a society varies, and that really depends largely on the values of the society. Are we holding on to tradition, or are we encouraging change and an evolution of thinking? So the rate of change within a society varies, and we can even say, even look at what technologies kids have in their classes or in their homes. Which homes have encouraged this change, and what has tried and who has tried to kind of stay with the past. The third one, the amount of pluralism in a society. Pluralism is the idea of looking out for the common good or everyone, or is the society just looking out for the good of number one? The fourth one, yes, the extent of the society contacts with other cultures. Are we completely walled off from knowing what's happening in the rest of the world? Do we celebrate, or do we even pursue learning about others? That is a big idea. The fifth one, factors of the past influence the events of the future. What has happened to us in the past is going to influence what happens to us moving forward. And then something that, just a side note to go in there, is if we stop teaching the past, is that then going to affect what happens in the future? And the last one, human beings in different stages of civilization act differently with the same problems. 300 years ago, I am hungry is solved differently than I am hungry today. And so people act differently when they are faced with the same problems. Those are the 6 big ideas that we need for our kids to grasp. And a lot of us might think, okay, those are totally simple concepts, but they're not to young children. And if we can have these 6 big ideas understood by our kids, the idea of social studies, geography, economics, government will be better understood by them. So what I want you to do is break these up on the top of your interactive notebook. And I want you can even write them, and then also illustrate what they mean, all 6 of them. Pause this, and then come back to me when you're ready to move on. Okay, we have 2 slides for in the classroom. So big ideas in the classroom. From this slide, you're going to pull 2 from that middle area, and then on the next one, you're going to pull your last one. So I want you to, as I'm going through these, to think about the top 2 that applies to you. So for kindergarten through 12th grade in social studies, it typically includes 3 years of American history and at least 1 year of world history, which is insane. And most of those happen in higher elementary, middle school, and high school. So they get 3 years of American history and at least 1 of world history. And I want you just to personally reflect, how do you feel about those? How comfortable do you feel with American history, and how comfortable do you feel with world history? I know that just personally, I wish that I had more world history training so I can know what's going on in the world and I can understand current events and how they impact today. The second one, primary grades, will typically cover holidays, history of students' families, local community, Native Americans, and pioneer life. That is in our lower elementary. 4th grade studies states and regions. 5th grade typically develops the whole year to U.S. history. 6th grade is Western Hemisphere and the world and ancient civilizations. So knowing what you are going to be licensed for, illustrate the 2 that applies mostly to you in the classroom top 3, just the first 2. And then on the 3rd one is going to come from the next slide. So pause this, illustrate the 2, and then let's keep moving forward. Your last illustration is going to pull from one of these, and let's just read over these and then we'll discuss them a bit. Students who read the revised versions of text recall significantly more of the content. So this is talking about a textbook that you give students. I would say that a lot of us were taught history through a history textbook, and you opened your page to page 32, and we're going to read today, and then we're going to do a worksheet. But it's shown that if you can revise a version of that text, what I have described to you as an interactive notebook, I have typed it in more kid-friendly terms and then have them read that part, that they read and understand it a lot more. Rewriting text to make them more interesting as well as more coherent encourages students to reflect. Remember to pause several times during the reading to talk about what came to mind, and how I have modeled interactive notebooks, excuse me, helps us to pause, reflect, really help them understand each part of a text. Instead of reading 6 pages, I have condensed it into 1 page of typed notes on my part, and then I have continued everything that we have not covered. I'm continuing through lecture, discussion, videos, music, artwork, and that is the way to really teach history through the emotional human aspect. It is important to review the textbook as just one among many resources to draw on in planning and history curriculum designed to accomplish social studies goals, and we'll talk about this. The history textbook is just one very poor resource given to you. When I taught history, they never, ever were given the history textbook. I would use it as a resource to retype some notes for them. But again, I am pulling in primary and secondary music or resources, including music or newspaper clippings, all kinds of stuff to really help them understand it. Analysis shows that students know about as much history as students of previous generations did, even though our culture is telling us that our students are lost and confused and they don't know anything. Most students they feel different and ill-informed in this in history, and the reason is that history texts are especially prone to problems summed up into phrases a mile wide but an inch deep. Right? They're making huge claims, but we really don't go into what it means. Oftentimes we have a parade of facts or something much like a Trivial Pursuit, identifying pointless questions and activities and develop other questions and activities. All of that is just memorize, regurgitate for a test, but we're not really understanding the curriculum that we're teaching, and then therefore the kids are not being able to reflect and really understand that. I would like for you, on your third bullet point for in the classroom, I would like for you to give me a summary statement on sharing information in class. Think about primary and secondary resources. Think about those 2 bullet points. I don't want you to copy anything down specifically. I want you to formulate a new summary about everything that we've talked about in this slide and write that and illustrate it for bullet point number 3. Pause and then come back to me. Okay, this is our last slide. And so when we are talking about, we talk about the big ideas that we want to teach our kids, these kind of the backbone, the idea that we want to teach our kids. We talk about in the classroom, but now really, what are we to teach? Because our understanding of the past often changes with new research and through reanalysis of the past, students need to be introduced to the kinds of processes and tools historians use. They can't just simply memorize facts. They need to learn how to learn and judge history as new information is presented to us. We need to teach students how to think, not what to think. This happens in typically poetry, literature, science, social studies. I'm not telling you what to think. I am teaching you how to think. That is producing lifelong learners. And so we're looking on what to teach, they have come up with 5 different type of processes that we want to teach our kids. And you are going to label and illustrate those. So the first one is chronological thinking. Students need to be able to distinguish between past and present and being able to create timelines. We need for them to be able to slap on World War I, World War II, Civil War, American Revolution, War of 1812. They need to be able to place those on a timeline, and that is often very difficult. So they can see cause and effects of things. So chronological thinking is the first one. Historical comprehension, we need for students to develop historical perspective, reconstructing meaning from passages for other resources. So looking at different types of resources given to them and being able to say, okay, this is what I know about this person that's writing this specific text. This is how I know they fit into society. This is what I know about society at that time, and this is what I know that's going on in the world. And so when I write something about how I drop the kids off at school, and then I come to a CCU and teach, and then I go to the gym, go home, make dinner. You know that because of the historical context that we're in now. Now, what happens if a woman of 1920s wrote that? Would it be different? Yes, it would. What happens if a woman from 1840s wrote that? Would it be different? Yes, it would. What happens if a woman from 1840s that was African American wrote that? Would it be different? Yes, it would. So we need for them to be able to think critically. The third one, historical analysis and interpretation. We need for our students to be able to formulate questions to focus inquiry or analysis and to be able to contrast ideas. I don't want to give them something and them say, let me consume this information, I'm good. I want to give them something and it constantly forms an inquiry process. They want to know more. They question things. They critique things. That's what we want to encourage for historical thinking, but that is the opposite of what most classrooms do. The fourth one, historical research capabilities. We want them, again, to be able to pose questions, to construct and explain. And I think this was even brought up in one of our classes that someone said, what happens if you don't know the answer to the question? Fantastic. That's good. Don't pretend that you know the answer to everything. You are not the train master, the conductor of knowledge. All you are doing is you are the person on the cruise ship that will help them find the answers. That's it, right? You are their discovery guide person, but you are not the one that holds all the answers. You're the one that teaches them how to find the answers. The last one, historical issues, analysis, and decision making. We need our students to be able to identify issues and problems in the past and suggest alternative choices. This is really creating the type of people that we need for the future. This is creating really good members of our community, because if they can identify issues in the past, not just memorize them, see the problem, and then say how they would fix that problem, they are going to be better at doing it when the problem arises again in the future. Because if you look at history of humans, the same problems keep happening over and over and over. If you get to the basics of many of our wars and battles and the issues that we've had when people to come together. And so it is so very important that they learn how to solve the problems of the past and even think about them. Even if they pose an answer or a solution to a problem and it's way off base, discuss it. That's the type of critical thinking that we want to develop in our kids. So all of these, as you look over the 5, you've illustrated them, you've jotted them down in your notebook, but the thing that I really want you to take away is on what to teach is the why part, and you're going to write this in that very first box. Why are we teaching our kids to do this? Why are we teaching our kids to think this way? And I want you to kind of formulate that idea and put that in the very top box. That is it for our What is History and Social Studies for the Child. I hope that this encouraged you to think a little bit differently and encourage you to create a different learning environment than what was given to you in elementary school. See you guys in a couple days.